Microphone check, 1, 2, what is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service.
Here we are again at the end of a rainbow.
When you unveil the cloak of darkness that shrouds much of Chester Watson's music and his public persona, you are presented with a kind, personable, inviting, and highly creative artistic soul from Florida. In today's conversation, Chester's thoughtful observations add color to his typically murky, gray-sounding music as he illustrates how his art helps him tap into his spirituality. He breaks down why he's attracted to all things unknown. He discusses his distinct rapping style, and finally dives into the thinking behind his excellent new album, Fish Don't Climb Trees. The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth artist interviews, album reviews, and general rap commentary on the best that the underground rap scene has to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. Chester Watson, how you doing today?
Pretty good, man. Can't complain at all. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. I have to say that that name of yours is pretty memorable. And I was reading somewhere when I was prepping for this interview, and I saw that you had said that it was inspired by like the old Victorian era, which made me laugh because literally someone in my Patreon group made that connection when they're like Chester Watson. It sounds like some like old English name. It's funny. I love that name.
Facts. Thank you. It definitely was inspired by that. I was super big into like British literature when I was in high school, so um, that definitely sparked the name.
Yeah, you have some pretty interesting kind of I guess literary influences and just kind of cultural influences that far exceed just the borders of the United States. I know like Japanese culture seems to be a pretty heavy influence in some of your bars, and obviously like some of the titles of your albums, like the record from 2020. What attracts you about Japanese culture? Because it seems to come through a lot in some of the imagery and topics you talk about.
Definitely just since I was younger, I've been kind of not immersed, but like have had Japanese influences, in here in the States and just in general, through video games, through anime, through a lot of those things subtly from my older brothers. They help, kind of plant that seed of Japanese culture and heritage and things like that, just from their appreciation of, Japan and Oriental and in general. So that's kind of where it came from. I think we all built our own love in different ways for it. I think just growing up, I guess not growing up, but more so in school, just learning about their culture was always so interesting because it felt so refreshing in a lot of ways.
How so?
Just because of their pace. I know a lot of things. Well, obviously, what they teach you in school is very like it's a very watered down version of reality. But it just felt like their pace and how they presented themselves as a people throughout history was always very kind of like royal, self aware. I think, and so I think that's something that I really liked about Japanese culture and just their philosophy in general and what they push. So yeah, that aspect of it definitely always stuck with me. And then obviously the sounds, very distinct music, and so yeah, just a combination of everything, samurais, all that stuff definitely bled into how I came to appreciate stuff from Japanese culture.
Yeah, I can definitely hear a lot of that emphasis on the pace and the self-awareness. It kind of shines through a lot in the music you've made your entire career. And you've had an interesting journey coming on the scene with a pretty significant bang in the early to mid 2010s, gaining some pretty significant internet notoriety with your early work when you were literally just a teenager. And when I listen back to records like Past Cloaks, so that's like 2016, and I just was pretty taken aback by, even though at that age, I mean, even though at that point you were how old were you in when that record was? I know some it's kind of a comp, but like I think you were like ages 15 to 17. That would be the
Yeah,
material, right?
yeah. I was that
Yeah.
was all the early stuff, SoundCloud stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, young kid, 15 to 17 for sure. Because if we dropped it in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
I was was that
Been
that's like
19?
what 7 years ago? Yeah, I was 19.
Yeah. And so like it seemed, even at that point, listening to the material off that record, it seemed as if you were already pretty close to figuring out, at least from my vantage point, pretty close to figuring out the kind of rap that you wanted to make from the jump. And it just really was pretty impressive just how kind of realized your style already sounded to be. But unlike most
Thank you.
artists, obviously, like at that age, most people are just kind of, making music in the shadows, metaphorically speaking here, where they're not necessarily under any kind of spotlight. Their music isn't really gaining traction at such young ages, so they can kind of create, refine their process, without any kind of external exposure. So I wonder for you, how did it feel creating music at such a young age and receiving such early notoriety? And how did that like influence your artistic growth, being the fact that it was like in front of an actual audience?
I definitely, I mean, you bring up a good point. It did happen pretty early on, so I kind of had to adapt. I think my like you self-awareness became heightened. Quality control, just being like just kind of having that quality control with yourself. It's like you can't put out everything that you make. Some stuff's better than others, and just kind of learning that process was always like something that I don't know, I kept in mind, I guess. But yeah, and I don't think I ever really like thought like hella about it until like probably when I got older. It was like, damn, because you're just kind of like in the moment making stuff. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just making and creating, but it was strange at times when I was so young and people, kind of looked up to me or revered me in different ways. And so that, I don't know, I definitely became more reclusive because of it, and just in general just was very cautious. And I think that caution may have became paranoia at certain points.
Right.
So definitely it was different, but it wasn't anything that was like not navigable type thing.
Right.
So uh but yeah, it was fun as well. I got to experience a lot of crazy shit very young, like
Mm-hmm.
touring. And so a lot of the shit that I was writing about, like, it wasn't uh, it wasn't like stuff that other people my age were even doing. It's stuff that people older than me were doing and stuff like that. So I feel like that's why older people related to it. People that were older to me related to it, and also people that were younger than me related to it, in my age as well. Just I just feel like my music back then felt super adventurous. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, but that's I don't know. It was definitely just an experience. I wouldn't say it was good or bad, but it was just fun. Had a lot of fun making music and creating and meeting people growing up, and traveling and all this stuff. It was always exciting. So
Yeah.
I don't take it for granted, and it was a blessing. So I definitely appreciate it.
I mean, like I just find it whenever I think about artists and envision how it must have felt doing something that you love and receiving such early attention and acclaim. I definitely kind of understand what you're saying, where it would be kind of a good thing in the sense that obviously that must be super freaking fun as hell. You must feel like top shit at times, but then also I would feel like, especially my knowing myself, like personally, I'd feel like I'd be really self-conscious too. Like, and I would I would be, I know I'd be an artist. Maybe eventually I would grow out of it, but I'd be the artist that's like way too in the comment section, way too in the replies and being like, wait, did John 35 say my album sucked? Now that ruined my day. Like I feel like that I'm really impressed by artists that can handle that kind of pressure at such a young age because it's just you're just so underdeveloped as a person still. Like there's so much like maturity you're yet to kind of have at that time.
Yeah, no, it's definitely different. And you learn to, you get thicker skin and stuff like that. Like you just kind of know that comes with the territory
Hmm.
at the end of the day, because you want to be a big artist, and you know that that's just what comes with it. So it's just like at the end of the day, whoever said that heard the song. So it's just like
Hmm.
it's kind of like at that point it's just like you just shrug it off. But it can, you can get in your head for sure, and you can stay there if you let yourself, like most things.
Yeah, yeah, like most
um
things. Yeah.
but it is life. It breathes and it grows, and it develops, as I do, and as most musicians and artists do. There, it's gonna change, and subtly, or it might change drastically, or you never it's kind of like it's just life. So I think it's very reflective of other aspects of it. Despite whether I was growing up in the art world or growing up in the business sector and I became
Hmm.
a big business mogul or whatever. I think it's all kind of in the same vein.
Yeah. And so like when I think about how you rap and your sound, specifically your style, to me your bars are just really, really sharp and like the way you rap is very methodical, precise. And I feel like it really hits with real clarity and it complements this kind of like cloud of haze that I feel like your beats often kind of sound like, or sometimes even psychedelic, particularly on this new album. How would you describe the kind of or style of rap that you set out to make?
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. And but yeah, just to describe, the style, I guess, is like definitely introspective. Introspective. I was talking with someone, they said lifestyle. So like, and then just like, cause it's always some fly shit, talking about clothes,
Hmm.
love fashion and stuff. So it's not just like, it's definitely life. Like it's everything. It's like a collage of thoughts in every song. Cause I feel like just coming from art as well with the collages, that's just kind of how I've learned to organize my thoughts in a way. It's just kind of like, okay, this thought goes here, this thought here, this thought here, to where it makes this picture that's kind of amorphous, but it makes sense. And it's, in that way, it's for me, it works, especially just because I come from making art so heavily. Yeah, I would just say it's kind of like a collage, how it comes together, just different types of, well, energies and, thoughts just kind of all compressed into one.
Yeah, I feel like your music, it's really good at setting a stage and like cultivating a mood. Like it's not like a halfway. I don't find when I'm listening to your music like you're halfway doing anything, if that makes sense. Like sometimes I can listen to a song where it's like maybe let's say the lyrics are, depressing and talking about some really dark shit, but like maybe the beat or the tone, even the intonation of the rapper, it's not really also feeling that depressed and sad and dark. And so like the song doesn't really actually make me feel that way. It's kind of just like, just halfway. It's kind of just not going all the way. Whereas with your music, I just feel like you really, you're really just like how would you say, thorough. And I feel what you're
Thanks.
saying, and I feel the kind of vibe because it's kind of like very consistent throughout all aspects of the song, beat, rhyme, your tone, your flow, all that stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely want to make it a full cohesive, even if subject matter is like kind of sporadic.
Yeah,
I definitely want the song to feel like, okay, this is a complete thought. This is a complete piece. This is a complete art piece. Like I can fully immerse myself in this in some way and get it. I think that's something that is intentional for sure.
mm-hmm.
Um, it has to be. But that's trial and error as well. Like not every song I make I release. Like definitely
Mm.
not. So it's always like, okay, how am I if I'm trying to capture a feeling, like I may make a beat that has a feeling, but I won't write to that beat until the right moment. That type of thing.
Yeah,
So like I may have a beat that's 2 years old that I'm not ready for until like now. Something like that. That happens all the time.
yeah,
Because I feel like, or I might have some words, that I don't have the beat for. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. I just feel like it's all kind of piecing it together, um, and creating these moments that feel complete, like you're saying, and that takes time.
right. And so you have a pretty interesting moniker that you've been dubbed many times, which is the monotone samurai. I find that interesting. But I find it fitting too because, like I said, like your raps are very methodical, they feel very calculated, thoughtful, and then your voice is definitely like on the monotonous side. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. But what exactly like attracts you to this like dark, hazy, monotonous style? Because it's not just in your raps, like in how you're rapping, but even just the beats that you create or choose from other producers. It's all kind of in that kind of world pretty often.
Yeah. I would definitely say, I guess just magic in general, like just the esoterica and the occult and things like that are in my just outside of music, just my interests in those things definitely bleeds into the music. So like things like witches or video games about magic or animes about niggas with samurai swords,
Mhm.
stuff like that. So it's just like all that stuff kind of influences my personality, one, but how I approach and see life and how I approach and see everything that I do. Strategically, for sure. You want to be strategic about things. So you don't want to, make the wrong move at the wrong time or do something that, you probably should have waited on or something like that. And that's all trial and error too. So it's really just about being an observer, really, but being like a powerful observer. I feel like that's what strategists are, and that's what they've always been throughout history is powerful observers. It's like, okay, they see a situation, bigger picture type of thing, and they can find it's their job to find the ways to figure these things out as the strategist or as the second in command, whatever you want to call it, but more so just as in terms of war strategists and things like that. They're always looking at the bigger picture and
Mhm.
every outcome, the bad ones and the good ones. I feel like some people can be blinded by the good that can come from a situation and ignore the pitfalls and things like that. So definitely, I guess that's one of the reasons. But yeah, mainly just there's really a whole bunch of reasons why I'm attracted to like the hazy kind of dark vibe. Like I feel like it just looks aesthetically for me, it doesn't look better. I just feel like I can relate to that vibe, like that just calm. Usually at night, there's not many people on the road if you're driving,
Mm.
and like it's just more down tempo. Daytime, it can be very fast paced. And I like the daytime, which is why, there's some songs that are happier and kind of more melancholy. Yeah, I think just my natural tone and my natural like pace and, just how I go about life and growing up, I've always been like attracted to that stuff now that I think about it. Like even the Batmans, like the Tim Burton
Mm.
Batman with Penguin. Like that was one of my favorite movies. The Wiz, which can be extremely dark. I actually just picked up a vinyl in Amsterdam. They had it, and I was like, "Oh shit!" But I preached this movie so heavily to everybody. Like the the way that I mean, the Wizard of Oz in general is like it's not like a super dark. It's definitely very surreal and very like, oh, what the hell? So I think I've always been attracted to things that I didn't necessarily understand because it was just interesting. It hit my brain and it just made me think in a different way. Makes me like I don't know, just it's just I think it's just a feeling more so for sure. It's definitely a feeling. It just makes me kind of sit back and slows things down.
Yeah, I mean, I find that interesting. You say that you see it's kind of like you're describing your role as a rapper and artist, like being a strategist and this powerful observer, because that's like a good way to characterize a lot of the ways you rap and like kind of the ways you construct your lyrics. Because it is just like I said, like painting this picture really vividly, very calmly, very sometimes and I would say often very soberly too, mind you. Like it's soberly in the sense that it's very clear-headed observations. It's like I don't get the impression that what you're rapping about is like impulsive or just like not thought out. Like I think it's very thought out is the
Mm.
point. And then sonically, I think it definitely just naturally fits with like your voice, like that down tempo sound. You know what's funny? Like, are you familiar with the label Ninja Tune?
I'm not, but I feel like that name sounds familiar, but I'm not familiar with them. I feel like
Yeah,
I've heard that name
Ninja
though.
Tune is like a pretty I think they're still active, but they were big in the 2000s, especially when like down tempo music, because you mentioned that like down tempo kind of trip hop. They're European for sure. They had artists like Cinematic Orchestra, Roots Manuva. Oh, they're still active. They have people like The Bug and Young Fathers now. But I just feel like you're like an offspring of that type of music. Like when you said down tempo, and I'm like, that's exactly the kind of like you're still making hip hop. It's not down tempo truly, but it's down tempo is super ingrained and related to hip hop music generally. And I just see that kind of connection like super strongly.
Thanks. Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure exactly. Okay, atmospheric. Yeah, definitely for sure. Atmospheric. All right, I'm looking at this ambient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, for sure. And electronica. Like I would say like my brother listened to a lot of like video game soundtracks, like
Yeah.
OSTs and stuff. So those have always just having that in the background growing up, definitely influenced me for sure. And those are usually pretty chill. Obviously, they do have some tech type songs in a lot of those OSTs as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that's probably where a lot of the electronic type of synthesizer sounds stem from. But yeah, for sure. That I can agree with that for sure. I love atmospheric sounds.
Mm-hmm. And like when you talk about some of your influences here, like you mentioned the pace and the self-awareness of Japanese culture being like a thing that really draws you to it. And then now you were mentioning like this idea of being this powerful observer. It definitely makes me think of the general themes of spirituality that show up very often in your music. Because like, and it makes me think of like how you create, because personally, I would I would love to say that when I do my creative work for the show, let's say, that I can very easily tap into the present moment, create very fluidly. But honestly, I find it really hard to do because mindfulness is just generally a really tough thing for me. I'm often just overly neurotic, let's just say. But for you, I think of songs like Gray, which speak to this idea of like finding balance between the highs and lows of life. And so like when you create, does the process of making music actually help you be more in tune with your spirituality and like find that equilibrium?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I feel like I'm explaining it to myself in a lot of ways and thinking it out throughout the process of writing. Just in general, like you're kind of dissecting either what happened in your life or what you want to happen or whatever subject matter you're tackling. You're dissecting it because you have to like within the ways that I write. I'm trying to build this picture, like you're saying. I'm trying to make it as vivid and as tangible as possible through my words. And then obviously the beat just kind of helps that. Yeah, but yeah, really just trying to, paint these pictures and create the vibe as best as possible.
Like I imagine if you do kind of get into this more present kind of mind state when you're creating, I imagine you're more sensitive to any kind of creative influence that comes your way when you're trying to like make your music. So like how do you usually kind of harness inspiration or influence creatively for your music? Like how does the inspiration typically come about to you?
I would say I would just say it kind of comes about in waves. Like as I'm writing, um, like I'll kind of write on and off about something, or it just kind of depends. Because I approach writing and beats very differently.
Hmm.
Writing is definitely more calculated and strategic, and beats are more kind of like free form, like they just flow. Like I don't
Interesting.
really try to be too like I don't try to be too calculated with the beats because it's just like you don't want to get you don't want to get stuck in like a rhythm to where like I'm making every beat the exact same
Like a
way.
formula.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to get stuck into that or like, anything that's like too repetitive to where it's like, okay, this is my routine. This is my schedule for making a beat. I do the kicks, the drums, the da 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 da. Like that's gonna get super old, super quick. And I found that out the hard way. Like, and obviously there is times where you kind of gotta force yourself and start it up that way. But yeah, I approach it completely differently. I try to just if I'm making a beat, I just any sound that even remotely sounds good to me, I try to work with it and see what comes from that. That's something that I've recently started doing more so, just because I feel like I know that you can make something good out of pretty much everything. It's just about how you tweak it. And that's not an ability that I always had as a producer. Sometimes well, not even back then, but just like I wasn't always as skilled at sound manipulation and stuff like that.
Right.
So now it's just like I could be a bit more free form. I know how to play more instruments. I have more instruments at my disposal, things like that. And then with writing, it's just kind of like, okay, I have to get this point across very clearly and very concisely because I only have so much time to do it.
Right. That's interesting. I think the as your skill level is increased with producing, it's natural that it allows you to be a bit more experimental and just a bit more fluid in how you create. And you're speaking of like the instruments that you've been like accumulating. I understand that your father is also an accomplished keyboard player and he's worked with like funk bands and produced for 3 6 Mafia even. And he worked with you on this latest album. So like how I imagine that he must have played a pretty significant influence in your general musical development and all that. So like what kind of role did he play in shaping you as an artist?
Um, I wouldn't say very much. Like I didn't really start being around my pops too much until recently, like within the
Okay.
last like half decade. Yeah. But for the majority of my life, I would like I knew my dad, but like I didn't live with him. I lived with my mom, and he lived in a different state. So I
Okay.
didn't see him very often, and I didn't really see that side of my family very often growing up. Now I see them a lot more. But yeah, I wouldn't say that there was really any influence, which is why I didn't necessarily let that information out too early in my career because I
Hmm.
didn't want people to think that there was because it would have been misleading. But now that me and him are closer, I can kind of tell people like, yeah, we've done this and we've done that because we have. But back then, I didn't see him enough to actually like,
Like speak on that. I understand that for sure. It would have
yeah,
been inauthentic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wouldn't have been real. So, but now, we definitely, we link up and he records a bunch of stuff for me. Like he recorded a whole bunch of a Japanese horror film. He recorded he recorded all of 1997, the EP.
Hmm.
I want to say I recorded some songs at his crib in Memphis, but I don't know if I recorded them at his studio. Uh, I don't remember, but either way, I was around him making fish, and I was living with him for parts of this, like first parts of the song. So this is the first time where I was like actually around my pops for an extended time, probably like 2 years ago. Definitely very, obviously interesting and very eye opening to see how similar we were and then how different we were, and a lot of the shit that I did that I didn't know where the shit came from. I saw that it came from him, things like that. So it was just a dope, eye opening experience in that sense. And so I think it gave me a different appreciation. And obviously, our relationship changed from, what I just described, to where I didn't really know him, to where like, we know each other a lot more and we've worked on music together.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, shout out to my pops, bro. Shout out to my pops. He's a good dude. He's a good dude. He's always been a traveling musician though. So that's kind of like why I didn't see him very much, but he's always been doing his thing. And I feel like that, knowing that subconsciously inspired me, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, word.
I mean, imagine it just made it feel like making music felt more of a real thing because your dad was actually doing it. I have to imagine that it influenced you, at least on that level, as you're saying.
Yeah. Like just knowing that, okay, somebody so close to me is like going to fucking Japan and going to South Africa and doing all this shit off the strength of music. It was like, okay, if like you said, it felt real. It felt like, okay, this is not something that's just like an idea. This is something that's actually very accomplishable, but you have to have a ridiculous work ethic. Like you have to
Yeah.
have a very crazy work ethic. And I guess I did know that from early on because I was making music and shit very young. So yeah, it did subtly. Silence is powerful.
Hmm. Yeah. And so let's get into Fish now. Love this album, first of all. Great, great record. You play with this theme of fish on Fish Don't Climb Trees, the album, and are a fellow Pisces, because I'm a Pisces as well. Shout out.
Eh.
And and I can certainly feel that Pisces energy on this album, considering the emotional scope of the record and the vulnerability that you show. And from what I understand, you went through a bit of a darker period in the years prior leading up to this album being created. And from what I understand, you wanted to be just generally more in tune with your emotions on this album. So could you elaborate on what your mindset was creating this record and how that inspired you and inspired the emotions and feelings you expressed on this album?
I feel like because I was going through so much real shit, I was like, fuck, I need to talk about this. I can only imagine what other people are going through. And, COVID hit and life hit everybody like a fucking train. So I feel like it was just eye opening to reality. One, how short life is. We lost a lot of people. How precious the people that we have here are. How much it just kind of put a lot of things into perspective for me. And I feel like that made me hyper focus on being real. but like just like you said, vulnerable, just being like
Mm-hmm.
open in my writing. Like, okay, I know I can't be the only person going through this shit, and I know the toll that this shit did on me. So I can only imagine, somebody else hearing something that somebody they respect going through, or just to be just. I didn't want to seem like I don't know, like this untouchable type of person or whatever. Like how people, not how they made me seem, but just like how some people may have seen me based on my old music. Like, oh,
Right.
this guy is kind of like distant and, he don't really care about a lot of shit. And I don't, but it's just, there are things that I do really care about a lot. And I feel like that is something that I never really spoke on until this album very clearly. So yeah, that's one of the things that I just wanted to get off was just like, okay, there's a lot of shit in this life that is worth it in every way. And, you know, not all of it is for you.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of it is for, you gotta choose your battles, things like that. Like there was so many things that I was figuring out in the course of making this album that I wanted to try to put into it in some way that I think that's how, it ultimately came about.
So what were some of these things that you do care about that you mentioned you shared on this record for the first time? Like what is it, certain topics or experiences?
Yeah, like just, money, love, money troubles and, love, uh, how I kind of feel. Like I've always kind of made songs about, oh, I like my girl, da 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 da, but I've never like really made like, I don't know, like super heavy kind of emotional songs or like love songs, kind of like how Bora Bora felt. I feel like power struggles internally, like, okay, is this some shit that I can do? Is this something that is meant for me? There's a whole bunch of things that I kind of wanted to get. And then obviously confidence level, like overcoming being not being not confident, but just overcoming being, I would say just cynical,
Hmm.
like just overcoming that type of thing. Like life is not worth it. Like that whole vibe is just like, all right, bro, you got to get off that if you actually want to make something and, you know, productive and inspire people and shit like that. So, and that's ultimately what I've always wanted to do. I just feel like there's just been times where that hasn't been, I guess, the easiest thing in terms of like getting myself to write about it. And so I feel like that's definitely one of the things. But yeah, even just my love life in general, just being more open about that, like on Tourniquet. Like I've never been as abrasive about shit like that. I've
Mm-hmm.
never really, been abrasive on tracks like, well, maybe I have a while ago, but like lately, nah. So it's just like really just exploring all these different caverns and caveats of myself and my personality as a human being. It's like, okay, I'm known as a monotone samurai, but I also get angry and I also, fall in love and I also deal with this and deal with that. So it's just like really just putting, that out there. Family stuff, pops, moms, homies, you know what I'm saying? All that stuff.
Yeah, I definitely see that kind of growth there. And I mean, even just like you were talking about not being like cynical, like I find that's not just in like in terms of making music, like that whole idea of like, especially if this was recorded, as you're saying, during the COVID situation, it was definitely a hard time for people to not be incredibly cynical about everything, which is like understandable. But at the end of the day, like you said, if you really want to kind of create something that can inspire people, can move people, a certain degree of faith or hope is often required, I would think, like just because, and it's not easy to get there when all the facts on the ground are kind of telling you this shit's hopeless. That's not that's it's a hard way to live if you're really gonna like embody that. It's hard to get up every day when you have that kind of mindset, even if it's like really hard to overcome. You got to do it.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. It's hard to it can be very hard to get yourself out of those holes and things like that. And so it's definitely something that I just wanted to, you know, shed light on. Like there's a lot of shit out here that's good. And that is worth it. Just to kind of counterweight, a lot of the heavier material in my discography. Just make something that felt a bit more like a light at the end of the tunnel type of vibe.
Hmm. And just generally, I just love how cohesive this record is, from a lyrical point of view, but also musically. Like the transitions between songs, the progressions. Like I think you mentioned, yeah, you mentioned Bora Bora just a second ago. Like if I'm not mistaken, that's the track where it's like in the verses, there's like these additional kind of instruments or samples or whatever it is that come in. Like it's just really refined levels of progressions in these beats, complementary production. It's really immersive. It definitely fits that kind of underwater fish motif that the record has quite a bit. I feel like this is a nice fresh take on psychedelia and rap in a really cool way. So like describe the sound you were trying to ultimately cultivate on this record.
Yeah, I can definitely and thank you. Yeah, definitely was trying to, you know, expand on the sound that I already have, the kind of murky sound, but also make it more lively,
Hmm.
like more up tempo. I wanted to keep the same sound, but make it more like danceable or make it just more like I can bump this shit in my car type of vibe. But it's
Yeah.
still like in the same realm of like, okay, it's dark, it's misty, it's still Chester, but it's like Chester if he was, I don't know, like Chester. So if we're talking in terms of walking versus running, it's like Chester briskly walking versus where my older music is like me just chilling, window shopping at the mall walk, that type of
Mm.
thing. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I feel like there's just a pace difference that I wanted to expand on and just experiment with as well. For sure with a lot of the songs. And then just instruments. Wanted to see, you know, how much I could pack into some songs, the layering I definitely worked a lot on with the songs in this, and I feel like the instruments that I used a lot of the same equipment throughout the entire project. I didn't really let me look. I didn't really use anything. Yeah, pretty much every song has some piece of equipment within this, like within my setup. So I feel like in that sense, they all are tied together by they were kind of all made in the same place with the same stuff. So just finding different ways to use what I already had and not necessarily seek out, oh, I need the latest synthesizer, I need the latest this, the latest that, but just really utilizing the stuff that I had and the stuff that just using it in different ways, trying to stretch it, trying to experiment with it, just because I felt like there was so much potential with the things that I had that I wasn't giving them the energy to fulfill.
Yeah, I think you succeeded big time. I love that observation about like the pace because that's something I also I was gonna talk wanted to talk about related to your general kind of deliveries and flows as a rapper because there's a certain kind of dexterity you already possessed as a rapper, but some of these flows are like particularly more bouncy, more catchy. I think you said like danceable earlier on this record, and it's just it's really different for you. I'm trying to think of the specific titles, and those are escaping me. But there's at least a handful of tracks here where like you're using a certain flow that's like I would maybe even hear that's kind of like reminiscent of something on a more like commercially focused record, even though what you're rapping about, everything else is still very Chester Watson at the end of the day. But what it does suggest to me is that you're hitting like a new level of kind of confidence on the mic. you sound really sure of yourself, even more so than on your previous records. So like how do you feel the growth you've experienced in your artistry manifested itself on this latest album?
I would say like you said, just growing and listening to different stuff, like even the more commercial stuff, or working with Kent in a lot of senses. Like his music is a lot different than mine. So like the lessons that I learned making beats for him and working with him, writing to songs around him. I I took that, I took those lessons with me, like up tempo. It
Mm-hmm.
it gets the crowd, even just turning it up just a bit. It brings a whole different vibe to how you have to approach a song. So
Right.
I definitely think I brought that, just sampling, different sampling techniques. There's a whole bunch of like things that, I guess I kind of kept in mind throughout the creative process. But ultimately, yeah, just wanted to show that there was growth in general, like that this wasn't that not only growth in the music, but growth as a person. I think I wanted to show, that I was maturing, like you said, that I was becoming more confident in just everything as a man in the world, as a black man in America. I was becoming more confident in my skin with those things and with the battles that came with those things. Just existing, a lot of that stuff, I wanted to tackle, and I just wanted to shed light on to people. Obviously, everybody knows, you know, kind of the gravity of the situation and how it's changed and how it's still changing and how a lot of rights are being, taken away in real time, which is kind of crazy, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of just wanted to, like wake people up to their emotions again. I feel like we can be very desensitized to what's going on around us. And I feel like, like that was me growing as a person. Like, okay, my platform and what I say matters to a lot of people. So let me try to, I don't know, let me just try to make, I don't even know, just let me try, not even to make being a good person cool, but like let me try to like, because apathy I feel for a while, and even now just being like, oh, I don't really give a fuck, like I don't care, that scene is cool. And so
Yeah.
it's just like, let me try and acknowledge that that is an aspect of life. Yeah, you're gonna be apathetic about some shit, you're gonna care and not care about certain things, but at the end of the day you really do have to like put your effort into something and really show up for people around you and stuff like that. Just be a good person. I feel like that's something that I wanted to, show in the material, and, growing as a producer, just showing that effort is always needed. No matter what level you're at, you're going to need to try, whether that's making beats or trying to approach the cover differently. Like the following, it took us forever to get that shot,
Yeah,
but
it
we
looks
got,
sick. You got
thank
some
you.
great artwork overall in the press release for this. I was impressed.
Thank
Really
you.
really helped the whole package.
Thank you. So, but just things like that, just really taking your time and putting your effort into it, I think, you know, definitely something that I wanted to show.
Well, I think you definitely did, and just want to know now, like for any fans listening to this, is there what kind of like merch or upcoming work, whether it's just this record you want to push that, or anything else people should be on the lookout for from you in the future?
I would just say this is coming out probably just more videos. Just be on the
Nice.
lookout for more music videos. Working on music now, really just kind of building a repertoire of sounds and working on this album. Can't say too much about it because it's still in very early stages, but it's gonna be kind of like a mixture of what fish and a Japanese horror film. So definitely
Interesting.
more conceptual, but still like I don't know. I'm coming at it like it's just another evolution of just growing and figuring out how to like sequence an album and blend songs and make it feel like an experience. That's something that I'm learning more and more every time I release something. So that's kind of what I want to go in from the beginning, with the intention of like, okay, I'm documenting everything for one. Like I want to record absolutely everything because that's not something that I've always had the chance to do with when making albums. I've never actually had the chance to do it. So just like day in the life stuff, you'll see me more active just on like probably not, Twitter or anything like that, but just more active, like showing more about how I live and more about how like me and the homies, because we're all kind of like ducked off. So, there's people know that we do cool shit, but they don't know what we do. So,
Mm-hmm.
we're just trying to record more and just, really capture the good times. Cause like I said, life is short, wake up call. A lot of things crazy are happening. So, yeah, really just, making stuff. We're gonna try to put out 10 Wookie vinyl. That one hasn't had a US release ever. So it's coming up on 10 years as well next year. So really just, trying to fulfill, check all the boxes and gonna start making more clothes. I want to start dropping one pieces, but I don't know when I'm gonna do that. But I do make those and stuff. So I might eventually drop some. But yeah, bro, just grinding, really just trying to build that album and working on Kent, something with Kent.
Nice,
We're working
nice.
on a collab project.
Yeah, let's see. You
Yeah.
guys make some great music together, and whether it's just
Thank you.
raps or just you producing for him, and like it's always a good time.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, that's really it, bro. Just expanding and growing forever.
Yeah. Oh, I gotta say, I'm very, very appreciative of you coming on the show. I love the way you approach your craft, and just yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Very, very good talk. It's definitely a honor to be on this and appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. I'll leave it there. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
You
Talk to you
too.
later.
Cheers.
Peace. So there we have it, another episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV. I hope this episode gave you some new perspectives and insights into what the greatest art form known to man in hip hop music has to offer. If you want to support the show in the most meaningful way possible, it would be my absolute honor to have you as a patron in the new Rap Music Plug podcast Patreon. Through this Patreon, you will be getting exclusive content such as bonus episodes, exclusive album recommendations, exclusive playlists, early access to episodes, and more. And above all, though, you will be able to support the show directly in a way that will not only justify the crazy amount of time I spend on this show already, but allow me to cover some of the expenses related to supporting all of these great artists that we cover on the show through the website, and will allow us to sustain and build on this amazing growth that the RMPP has experienced recently. So if you have any questions about any of the Patreon stuff, or just want to keep tabs on the show, interact with me on rap music and all the great stuff that we can talk about, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rapmusicplugpod, or shoot me an email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify as well. But that's enough self-promotion for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.